Hello, my name's Kevin, this is Dirty 20 Gaming, and this is part 2 in a 3-part series on how to create interesting characters. The first one was about finding inspiration. Now that you've got that, this part 2 is about fleshing out that interesting character. It's about filling out your character sheet and writing a backstory that goes along and helps tell your story, the one you want to explore in this whole character. So we're going to start with the character sheet because that's the easier part. First of all, as I always say, please resist the urge to min-max. Please resist the urge to build perfect combinations. If you're a new player, that's great. Build yourself a killing machine and wade through the world with gore up to your waist. It's great fun. For those more experienced players, I hope you've done that enough, and I hope you're interested in trying something different. So resist that urge to pick a background or a skill that covers a gap in your space. Instead, filter every decision you make when you're filling out your character sheet through the thing that makes you special, through your inspiration. Another way of putting that is make sense with your choices. I'll give you a couple of examples. Again, all these examples are D&D 5e because that's what I play most. It's the most common system in the world. Let's go with that. So, making sense with your choices. Let's start in the very top right hand corner of that sheet with background. I spoke in the previous video about my 5-year-old storm sorcerer. Obviously, there's only one background choice for a character like that. It's Urchin. Anything else wouldn't make sense. Does it give me the best benefits? No, but it's the only one that makes sense. Same thing with skills. When you're filling out that skills section and deciding which of those choices of skills you've got, filter those. Make sense with those. I also spoke about my mastermind rogue with the courtier background who has 8 skills above +5 and speaks 7 languages. The vast majority of those skills are charisma based. This is a mastermind rogue who has a higher charisma than his dexterity. To just give you an idea. Another one, your stats. I mean, those are your basic 6 things in the whole game. This is the thing everything else in the game hangs on. Make sure they make sense. I talked in the last video about my cleric who wants nothing in the world but to be the best healer ever. But she has a wisdom of 6. She's terrible at healing. Obviously, to make that work on the character sheet, she has to have a statistic of 6 for wisdom. Otherwise, this does not work. A slightly more subtle subclass. And you're picking your subclass, whether it's courtier for your rogue or whatever it is. Pick one that makes sense. My war cleric, for example, she's a Goliath. So in her past, she comes from a tribe that is just violence, 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 combat, combat, combat. So the only kind of choice that made sense for her is a war cleric. It doesn't make her any better at healing. It doesn't help her at all in that regard, which is what she wants desperately. But it is realistic. Same thing with spells, invocations, meta magic. Choose the ones that make sense. Just again, as a simple example, I've got a Hexblade Warlock. His patron is the blade that he carries. So every single spell choice is melee based. It's about maximizing the damage that sword does. And that's right. That means I built a Warlock with no Eldritch Blast. In fact, no ranged attacks at all. Effective? Not really, but very, very pointed and fixated on doing one thing very well. This can spread even to some of the places that most people don't think about when they think about making an interesting character. How about weapons and armor? I have yet to see, in all the years I have played, I have yet to see a dexterity-based cleric that uses a rapier and medium armor. I'd love to see it. Somebody please send me a link. I want to see one so I don't have to build one. Even those little boxes on the right-hand side, ideals, bonds, things like that. Make them match your character's character. If your character is a jerk, put jerk in there. That way, early on in the game, before you've completely gotten the head of your character, when you're stuck for what he or she is going to do, you can just look at that box and go, oh, right, they're a jerk, and do something that makes sense along those lines. Once you get into the character, of course, you can do that less and less. But at the start, it's very helpful. Make those boxes tell everything about you that they possibly can to help you play that character accurately and to really help you explore what it is you're trying to explore. Now for the slightly more complicated part, backstories and fleshing them out. First of all, this is not a video on how to write a backstory. There's lots of those out there. I suggest you go and watch them. Most of them are very, very good and will help you write a really solid backstory. Weirdly enough, I suggest do that first and then come back to it with this filter. This is really about asking yourself that question again, that what if question. If that was the way that you got this character to be inspired, if it was a what if it was a I want to explore this. This is where you work that into the story. Simple examples, being a sorcerer who doesn't want to use metamagic. Simple as that. Explore that. See how that works out. Try playing a female character, a male character, a character with a different sexuality than you've got, a suboptimal character that is weak and has flaws. All those things can go into your backstory to help you focus yourself when you start to play, to pick those right scenes and those right approaches to make that character come alive so that you can really explore what it was you wanted to explore with them. Maybe this is a good time for an example. The question I asked myself that created one of my favorite ever characters was, what if a child was given amazing magical powers? And what I came up with was a 5-year-old storm sorcerer who had been thrown out of the house for blowing up the kitchen, the outhouse, and the dog all before breakfast one day. Great backstory. Right? The one thing about this is that everything I've talked about so far is entirely player-centric. What I mean by that is it's a form of metagaming, but it's not bad, in my opinion. What you're doing is intentionally building a character that will let you to pretend to be someone else, to experience their problems, their difficulties, their life, and find ways to overcome that, even if it is only in a fictional world. That's what role-playing is all about. So we're going to tell a story, and to tell that story we have to have interesting characters. So building them with the intent of exploring something, yes, it's metagaming, no, it's not bad. For those of you that prefer more practical advice, I know some of you were looking to go, well, you didn't say anything for the last 7 minutes. It makes no sense. Here is some practical advice for you. Add the following things to your backstory. Again, this isn't how to write a backstory. Add these things to the previous backstory that you already wrote. 1, an origin story. What made you this way? Explain the odd combination. Why are you a hill dwarf dexterity-based monk? Why are you choosing charisma skills if you're a rogue? Why are you fighting against this weakness that you have? Tell me. One way to do that is to go through and write at least one time when your interesting feature benefited you, at least one time when your interesting feature cost you, and what does that interesting feature drive you to do? The first bunch of those are about your past. That last one is about your future. That's where we start talking about story arcs, and that's the next video. So again, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game creatively.